For this lesson, we're going to move through history a little bit before we reach our ultimate destination. So we're going to move on from the post-World War II sci-fi boom into the space age. And the late 1950s, we have a phenomenon known as the space opera. So in many cases, this is immersive science fiction. So technology is an integrated part of the story, usually set in the future or in space. Unlike the day the Earth stood still, where we're still set on Earth, the aliens come. In this case, many times the Earthlings are in spaceships flying around. Good example is Forbidden Planet from 1956, and this was kind of its particular era's Star Wars. It was very big. People were lining up around the block to see it. I don't show it in classes anymore because people tend to find it incredibly boring, but I highly recommend it if you're really into science fiction. And it also was partly the inspiration for Star Trek. And if you watch it, you can see that the way it looks and the special effects are very similar to the Star Trek series. Also, This Island Earth from 1955. Similar film in some respects. This one's set on Earth, but in this case, aliens kidnap a bunch of Earthling scientists and try to make them create weapons for them so they can fight an interplanetary war. And at the end of the film, the surviving scientists and the aliens fly back and see the war kind of reaching its conclusion. And you've probably seen this on Mystery Science Theater because it's, well, kind of unintentionally funny in a lot of ways, but another one I recommend if you're very into science fiction. So these films had really high budgets for their time, very impressive special effects, adult themes. They dealt with Freudian psychology mixed with technology, things like that. They had sci-fi credibility. They were based on famous sci-fi stories. And this was kind of the peak and the end of the sci-fi boom that began in the late 40s and early 1950s. Then as we move into the early 1960s, we get, kind of cheap knockoff drive-in sci-fi films, which still managed to bring in a little bit of money, but it wasn't the box office force. So science fiction kind of waned a little bit, kind of like it is today. Now, after the space age, we move into the Vietnam and post-Vietnam era, and we get a phenomenon known as the dystopia. And, Vietnam, as we saw during the horror part of this class, had a really profound effect on writers and directors' attitudes towards the future and towards humanity on the whole. So what is a dystopia? Well, it's the opposite of a utopia. So if a utopia is a perfect society, a dystopia is a perfectly awful society. So examples of dystopian films, we have 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is based on an Arthur C. Clarke short story, introduces a scientific definition of God, but it's not a very pleasant definition of God, and we kind of see humanity kind of going by the wayside in this particular film. Planet of the Apes from 1968, and in this case, most of you know what this film is about. Charlton Heston crash lands on a planet full of apes. The humans are basically savages. The apes run the show. And then at the end of the film, he realizes that Earth has been destroyed by the Earthlings and the apes have taken over. Other good examples of dystopian films, we have THX 1138, the early George Lucas film, A Clockwork Orange, the Kubrick film. Also the Omega Man, another Charlton Heston film, in which we have a bunch of, well, that one's set on Earth, but we have a lot of, I guess you'd call them space zombies in a way, but they're more like vampires. And that's the one, I Am Legend, is basically based from the same source novel. And also Zardoz, which I highly recommend if you want to watch something totally mind-bending, in which Sean Connery runs around in a red G-string and has like a long braid and mutton chops and a handlebar mustache and does all kinds of crazy stuff. It's like a giant head that guns shoot out of. Yeah, crazy. The film for this lesson is Soylent Green, probably one of the most famous dystopian films, and definitely one of the films that definitely creates a very imaginable dystopian society. So it's from 1973, also starring Charlton Heston. He was one of the great champions of sci-fi in the 60s and 70s. Based on a Harry Harrison novel called Make Room, Make Room, and that title of the novel will make a lot of sense if you watch the entire film. So it's a really grim look at the future and the not so distant future. I think it's only like 10 years from now. The world's grossly overpopulated, jobs are scarce, natural resources are dwindling. Wow, this sounds like society today. Women are furniture. They actually, if you buy an apartment, you get it furnished. A woman comes with it. And what is Soylent Green? That's one of the questions central to the film. And of course, if you already know, don't give it away because it's part of the joke. And it's essentially a murder mystery set in the future, but it's definitely a very dystopian look at the future. Very, very awful, awful place.